Some places in Skyrim call attention to themselves. Ruins scream, peaks crackle with dragonfire, shrines gleam with divine light. And then there's Lake Ilinalta. It doesn't scream, it doesn't even speak. It just sits. A stretch of water so vast it breaks the horizon. Quiet, peaceful, beautiful, even trees lean gently at its edge. Birds circle overhead, reflections ripple in the shadows. But under the surface, it remembers. Because Ilinalta isn't just a lake, it's a grave. And the things that sunk here didn't just drown, they were buried on purpose. Which could make this the most mysterious lake in all of Skyrim. There are many ruins across Skyrim. Few are as haunting as Ilinalta's Deep. Near the lake's western edge, what looks like a rocky outcrop reveals itself to be the entrance to a temple half swallowed by water. Inside lies the wreckage of what was once a proud fortress of the College of Whispers, long since overrun. The current occupants, a necromancer, the former teacher who brought ruin not only to his students, but to the very walls of the temple itself. Obsessed with defeating death, he used the temple to conduct horrifying experiments with black soul gems and Azura's star. But the location of Ilinalta's Deep raises more questions than answers. Why did the temple sink? Did the necromancer cause the collapse, or was he simply squatting in the ruins of something darker? Some believe the lake claimed the temple because of the rituals held within it. Others say the waters were drawn to the power of the star, pulled down by the weight of the souls trapped inside. But the truth is simpler and worse. Simply, no one cared, so the lake took it. Across from the ruin, near the northeastern part of the lake, lies a standing stone, the Lady Stone, resting quietly on its own tiny little island. It promises regeneration, healing, and rebirth. But it also sits alone, far from the roads and unguarded. Players rarely visit it more than once. In a game filled with guiding forces, the warrior, the mage, the thief, the lady stands apart. Passive, isolated, ignored. But why? Some say it's simply underpowered, a gameplay design decision, which could be true. But in Skyrim, isolation is usually intentional. Perhaps the lady was once worshipped before the temple sank. Perhaps she watches over the drowned, or perhaps she's the reason nothing ever comes back from the bottom of the lake. She doesn't protect, she preserves. Scattered along Lake Ilinalta's banks and shallows are a dozen sunken rowboats. Most are broken in half, some have skeletons slumped inside. One has a journal telling of a husband's ill-fated fishing trip. There was no major naval battles near Lake Ilinalta, no official histories of floods or disasters. And yet, the boats continue to accumulate. One theory, Ilinalta acts as a magical sinkhole, quietly pulling things in. Another suggests that the lake was cursed by the necromancer in Ilinalta's Deep, creating a magical pool that drowns anyone who stays too long. But maybe the scariest answer is there's no curse. People just stopped rowing, and the lake doesn't ask why. Falkreath Hold and Riverwood sit close to Lake Ilinalta. You'd expect there to be fishermen, trade, boats docked on its shores. But there are almost none. No harbours, no fisheries, no daily traffic across the waters. A few NPCs mention the lake in passing, but none really rely on it. And that silence? It's louder than any scream. Even Hod, Riverwood's lumber mill operator, who sits just a stone throw away from Ilinalta, doesn't use it. He looks away from it, as if he knows something you don't. Nestled in the woods near the lake, players have discovered unmarked shrines, often desecrated, sometimes guarded by necromancers or bandits. One such site sits southwest of the Guardian Stone. Just 100 metres from the lake's edge, a necromancer patrols it, bones litter the altar. These shrines aren't connected to quests, they don't offer blessings, there's no lore associated with them in books or dialogue, but they all share a common trait. They're close to the water, which suggests something chilling. Lake Illinalta doesn't just draw people in, it draws power. And maybe what it gives back isn't whole. In the quest The Black Star, we learn that Malin, once a respected mage, retreated to Illinalta's Deep to perform his soul experiments. The College of Winterhold never speaks of him. Not even Nalakar, who sends you to investigate, says much about Malin's past. His name has even been stripped from history. But why did he choose Illinalta? Why not a Dwemer ruin, a barrow, or even a hidden cave? The answer may be practical, proximity, isolation, but the answer may also be ritualistic. The waters of Illinalta are still, deep, and ancient. And if you were going to bind souls, you'd want the world to forget where you did it, and water covers all sins, and Illinalta never gives them back. Beneath the lake's surface are chests, weapons, and ruins, placed without any direct narrative reason. You can dive into the shallows and find helmets, coins, and bones. No enemies spawn there except for a few fishes, no quests lead you underwater, and no one talks about what's down there. That's what makes it chilling. Because Skyrim's design is rarely this empty on accident. If something is underwater, it was placed. And if it was placed, it means someone, somewhere, thought it belonged at the bottom. Exactly like the treasure map that leads you to the bottom of the lake where you find a chest. The lake didn't just drown bodies, it hid memories as well. Lake Illinalta also plays a role in mods and cut content tied to Oblivion Gates and Daedric incursions. Players have speculated that it was once meant to be a gateway site, a place where Daedric magic pulled after the Oblivion Crisis. Though the game never confirms this, the repetition of necromantic activity, the sunken shrines, and the haunted silence all point to a history that's been intentionally removed. Skyrim doesn't rewrite history, it just drowns it. There are no bard songs about Lake Illinalta, no tales in taverns, no epic poems of the sunken ship or heroic saves. Other places in Skyrim, like Riften's Canals or Solitude's Sea, have stories. Illinalta has nothing, just a blank spot on the map. And maybe that's what makes it more terrifying than any haunted ruin. Because it's not forgotten, it's just ignored. And the people of Skyrim have learned not to speak of what sinks there. Skyrim is a land of stone and blood, of ruin and fire, but Lake Illinalta is different. It doesn't shout, it doesn't whisper, it waits. It lets you forget what you saw. It lets you think it was a pretty view. It lets you move on. But it never really does. Because the things buried here, they weren't really meant to be found. And they weren't meant to stay dead either. They were meant to sink, to stay silent. Just like the lake that holds them, making this the most mysterious lake in all of Skyrim. Among Skyrim's snow-capped peaks and ancient ruins lies a land unlike any other, the Reach, a rugged expanse of red stone, jagged cliffs, and bitter winds. Here the Nord's rule is contested not by dragons or Daedra, but by men and women who refuse to yield. The Forsworn are an enigma within Skyrim's lore. They are neither simple bandits nor noble rebels. They wear bones, wield primitive weapons, and mutter to old gods long forgotten by the rest of Tamriel. They attack travellers without mercy, yet their cause, when understood, is heartbreakingly human. They are the Reachmen, descendants of ancient people, who once ruled the Reach before the Nords claimed it for Skyrim. They were promised peace, betrayed, slaughtered, and driven into the wilds. From there, they became the Forsworn, those who have sworn again, to reclaim what was stolen. But the true mystery of the Forsworn is not just their violence or their history. It's how their story reflects Skyrim's greatest contradiction. A land that champions freedom, yet thrives on conquest. To really understand the Forsworn is to understand the blurred line between rebellion and savagery, civilization and vengeance. To grasp the Forsworn mystery, we must begin with their origin, the Markarth incident. Long before the events of the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, the Reach was a province of Skyrim, but its people, the Reachmen, never truly accepted Nordic rule. When the Empire's influence waned after the Great War, chaos followed. Seizing the moment, the Reachmen rose up, expelling the Nords and declaring independence. For the first time in centuries, the Reach belonged to its native people. They crowned a king, the so-called King in Rags, a figure of charisma and vision. Under his leadership, the Reachmen rebuilt their society, returning to their old gods and old ways. For 2 years, they ruled peacefully. Then came Ulfric Stormcloak and his military. Acting with the approval of the Jarl of Markarth, Ulfric's forces retook the city in a brutal campaign. Thousands of Reachmen were slaughtered or imprisoned. Their king was captured and those who survived fled into the wilds. It was there, amid blood and betrayal, that the Forsworn were born. Their very name Forsworn is a paradox. They are both the ones who have forsworn their oaths of loyalty to Skyrim, and the ones who have sworn again to take it back. Their rebellion is not just political, it's spiritual. Every arrow they lose is a prayer to vengeance. When travellers encounter the Forsworn, they see savages. They live in caves and camps, wear fur and feathers and worship strange deities. But their wildness hides an intricate culture rooted in survival and memory. The Forsworn are descendants of the ancient Reachmen, a culture older than Skyrim itself. Their magic comes from the earth, from hagravens, twisted witches who serve as their priestesses, and from old pacts with nature spirits and Daedra. They don't rely on scrolls or tomes. Their knowledge is oral, passed down through ritual and blood. Their camps are small, hidden societies. Within them, there are leaders, shamans, and warriors. Every member has a purpose, from foragers to prophets. To outsiders, their ways do seem barbaric, but to the Forsworn, they are the last remnants of a stolen civilization. Their savagery is not born of ignorance, it's born of desperation. They've been hunted, exiled, and forced into the wilderness. When people have nothing left to lose, they stop caring about the world's approval. At the centre of the Forsworn mystery stands Madanak, their imprisoned king. When the Dragonborn meets him in the Forsworn conspiracy quest, he is no wild beast, but an eloquent, intelligent man. He speaks not like a murderer, but like a philosopher. You Nords, he says, have taken everything from the Reachmen, their land, their gods, their pride. Madanak's genius lies in his ability to maintain loyalty and unity even from a cell. Inside the Sidna mine, he commands the loyalty of his followers through charisma and vision alone. His escape from the mine, if aided by the player, is less a jailbreak and more a symbolic resurrection of a lost king. What makes him truly mysterious is his ambiguity. He is not purely good or evil. He has ordered atrocities, yes, but they are the acts of a man fighting for survival. His rebellion forces the player to question Skyrim's morality. If the Forsworn are monsters, what does that make the Nords who slaughtered them? Madanak is not simply the king in rags. He is the embodiment of people's pain, intellect, and refusal to die quietly. To understand the Forsworn's identity, one must understand their faith. They worship the old gods, ancient deities associated with nature, blood, and vengeance. These gods are likely Daedric in origin, though even the Forsworn themselves may not fully understand who or what they serve. Central to their faith are the Hagravens, women who have sacrificed their humanity in exchange for magical power. To outsiders, they are abominations. To the Forsworn, they are living conduits to divine strength. Through them, warriors are blessed and leaders are chosen. This connection to nature and blood magic gives the Forsworn a kind of primal intelligence. They understand the balance between life and death, growth and decay. Their wild practices, such as ritual sacrifice, is not mindless violence, but acts of devotion, reenacting the eternal struggle between the world's beauty and its cruelty. Their religion also reveals their greatest tragedy. Their gods have been forgotten, even by themselves. They cling to echoes of old rituals, not knowing that the world has moved on without them. Their worship is both faith and mourning. Though they are hunted and hated, the Forsworn's influence on Skyrim's politics is enormous. The Silverblood family of Markarth uses the Forsworn threat as justification to maintain their private army and economic control. The Thalmor manipulate both sides, ensuring Skyrim's divisions remain deep. Even Ulfric Stormcloak, whose actions created the Forsworn, built his legend on their corpses. Every rebellion needs a villain, and the Forsworn fill that role perfectly. They are a convenient scapegoat, violent enough to fear, misunderstood enough to ignore. Markarth's people whisper about Forsworn attacks in the hills, while the city's elite profit from the chaos. And yet, the Forsworn never truly die out. Their resilience mirrors that of the very mountains they inhabit. Every time one camp burns, another rises. Their survival is a quiet defiance, a statement that no amount of oppression can erase memory. The most unsettling truth about the Forsworn is how much they resemble the very Nords who despise them. Both peoples value freedom, pride, and honor. Both worship the land and fight fiercely for their homes, and both distrust outsiders. But the difference is that one side won history's coin toss. Skyrim paints the Forsworn as savages, yet their rebellion mirrors the Stormcloak's own cause. Ulfric's men claim to fight for Skyrim, for the Nords, while Madonach's followers cry, "The Reach is for the Reachmen." Both sides believe they are reclaiming what was stolen. Both spill blood in the name of freedom. This parallel exposes one of Skyrim's central hypocrisies. The Nords see themselves as liberators, but they are also conquerors. The Forsworn are what happens when you strip of identity and land, then punish them for fighting back. Their violence, while tragic, is not without cause. It's the echo of an injustice that Skyrim itself refuses to acknowledge. The Reach remains one of Skyrim's most haunting landscapes. Its mountains hide more than gold. They hide guilt, memory, and the whispers of people who refuse to die. The Forsworn mystery endures because it is unfinished. Their camps still burn, their songs still echo, and their king still lives in legend. And as long as the wind howls across the red cliffs, the Reachman's oath remains unbroken. We are the Forsworn, we cannot be killed, we will return. The Nords may rule the cities, but the mountains still belong to the wild, and the wild remembers everything. Skyrim is a land defined by diversity, from the frosted peaks of the Pale to the golden marshes of the Rift. Every race of Tamriel finds some foothold in this frozen north. Nords call it home, Imperials claim its roads, Dunmer fill its grey quarters, Khajiit roam its borders, and Argonians labour in its shadows. It is, in many ways, a microcosm of the Empire's reach, a melting pot of peoples drawn together by war, trade, and prophecy. Yet, amid all that life and struggle, there is a peculiar absence. For all of its cities, caves, ruins, and villages, there is one race that simply doesn't exist anymore in Skyrim. A race once so powerful that their disappearance reshaped the continent, and whose echoes still hum beneath the mountains. No other race in Tamriel has vanished so completely. Their cities remain, their machines still stir, and yet not one living soul of their kind walks the earth. Skyrim remembers them not as ancestors, but as ghosts of metal and stone. The Dwemer were not like the Nords or the Dunmer. They were not warriors or mystiques, not farmers or priests. They were engineers, philosophers, and atheists. People whose god was reason itself. They called themselves Dwemer, meaning people of the deep. To the Nords, they were the Deep Elves, an ancient branch of the elven races who sought not divine favour, but divine understanding. Their cities tunnelled into the roots of Skyrim's mountains, vast labyrinths powered by magma and mystery. While other races built in wood and stone, the Dwemer built in brass and steam. Their ruins are filled with whirring machines, pressure valves, and ancient gears that still turn after thousands of years. These mechanical sentients, dwarven automatons, guard the secrets of their makers, long after the makers themselves turn to dust. The irony of the Dwemer's absence is that they are everywhere. Their architecture defines Skyrim's underworld. Their machines patrol its ruins. You can almost feel their presence in every hiss of steam, every echoing clang of metal deep below the earth. And yet, not one of them remains alive to claim it. The Dwemer's disappearance is one of the greatest mysteries not only of Skyrim, but of all Nirn. At the height of their power during the First Era, they were the most advanced civilization in existence. Their cities glowed with light, their knowledge rivaled that of gods, and their understanding of tonal architecture, the use of sound and vibration to shape reality, was unmatched. But in a single unrecorded moment, they vanished. Not killed, not conquered or erased. They were just gone. Every Dwemer across all of Tamriel gone in an instant. The cause of their disappearance centers on one thing: their chief tonal architect, and his work with the heart of Lorcan, the divine organ torn from the god who created the mortal world. He believed he could use the heart to transcend morality itself, to give his people eternal existence without the burden of divine subservience. The result was probably annihilation. In one fatal experiment beneath Red Mountain, the Dwemer simply ceased to exist. Their bodies did not decay, their souls did not ascend. They left no corpses, only armor lying empty on the ground. Only one being survived, Yargrim, a Dwemer engineer who was absent in another realm during the disappearance. When he returned, he found himself utterly alone, the last of his kind. His body began to rot, his mind to falter, and his name became synonymous with extinction. When the Dwemer vanished, the world didn't cheer, it shuddered. Their disappearance left entire economies and ecosystems in chaos. The Nords lost their trading partners. Even the Daedra, it said, took note of the silence. Skyrim's mountains became graveyards. Miners who stumbled upon Dwemer ruins whispered of noises that shouldn't be there. Machines still moving, chambers that breathe, and lights that flickered in rooms that should have been dead. The Dwemer were gone, but their world refused to stop functioning. Perhaps that's what makes their absence so chilling. Death in Skyrim is common. You can meet ghosts, Draga, or necromancers who cheat it daily. But the Dwemer didn't die. They simply stopped existing, leaving behind a world that continues to function as though waiting for their return. Every gear that turns in their ruins is a heartbeat with no body. Every glowing crystal is a memory with no mind. If the Dwemer are gone, why do their creations still walk? The dwarven automatons are the last moving fragments of a vanished civilization. These machines defend the ruins tirelessly, programmed to attack anything that disturbs their halls. Some scholars believe the automatons are powered by magical cores or soul gems, but others whisper that the Dwemer themselves became these machines. That Cagrene's great experiment didn't destroy them, it transformed them. This theory suggests that the Dwemer didn't die. They exist within these machines, their consciousness distributed through the humming veins of their cities. Every centurion is a fragment of a collected soul, a mechanical echo of godless people. It's an idea both beautiful and terrifying, a race that saw immortality and found it in metal and fire, condemned to wander their halls forever as hollow echoes of their former selves. When the Dragonborn descends into a Dwemer ruin, it's not just exploration, it's intrusion. You're walking through a graveyard that still breathes. The Dwemer's faith, or lack thereof, was their defining trait. They rejected gods, Daedra and Aedra alike, believing that divinity was an illusion born of mortal ignorance. To them, the gods were not omnipotent beings, but powerful entities bound by the same rules of reality as mortals. Through study and reason, they believed these mortals could ascend to the same level or surpass it entirely. It was this ambition that led Cagrenet to the heart of Lorcan. The Dwemer wanted not to serve the divine, but to become divine on their own terms. Their philosophy was cold, precise, and merciless. Where the Nords had myth and mead, the Dwemer had logic and mathematics. Their temples were not houses of worship, but laboratories. Their priests were not prophets, but scientists. It's a vision of the world utterly devoid of comfort. No gods, no afterlife, only the endless pursuit of knowledge. Perhaps in their arrogance they found what they sought, a form of transcendence beyond mortal comprehension. Or perhaps they simply made themselves nothing at all. So why call the Dwemer the race that doesn't exist? Because they are both gone and present. Their absence is visible, their influence is tangible. They are the ghosts of progress, haunting Skyrim's mountains with the hum of their forgotten machines. Every adventurer who delves into a Dwemer ruin feels it, the sense that something is watching, measuring, and calculating. The ruins feel alive because in some strange way, they are. No other race in Skyrim evokes that same paradox. The Nords dominate its surface, the Dunmer thrive in exile, the Argonians endure in bondage. But only the Dwemer exist as both memory and mechanism. They are proof that power leaves traces long after life is gone. In the end, the Dwemer's absence is not a tragedy, it's a warning. Their cities still hum, their constructions still kill, their brilliance still blinds. But no laughter echoes through those halls, no warmth glows from their forges. The Dwemer proved that gods can be denied, but they also proved that in doing so, one risks becoming less than mortal. They sought eternity and found oblivion. And in Skyrim, where every race struggles to survive the cold, perhaps the greatest miracle is not immortality, but simply still being here. Because beneath the snow and stone, the Dwemer wait, not as ghosts, but as a memory the world refuses to let die. The only race that doesn't exist in all of Skyrim, because they were too clever to live. Far beneath the frozen peaks of Skyrim, past the veins of Dwemer metal and the roots of mountains themselves, there stirs a presence few mortals ever see, and fewer still survive. They move in the dark, whispering in the tongue of madness, their pallid skin glimmering faintly in the torchlight. Their eyes are gone, long since melted away by centuries in the black. To the surface world, they are known as the Falmer, the blind, corrupted remnants of the once proud Snow Elves. The Falmer are one of the most disturbing tragedies in all of Tamriel's history. People so ancient, so majestic, that their civilization predates Skyrim itself, and yet they were doomed to live forever beneath it. Their story is not just about survival, but about transformation, about what happens when a race loses its freedom, its vision, and ultimately, its soul. Before the Nords came from Atmora, before Ysgramor, before the Companions, Skyrim belonged to the Snow Elves. They were not the brutish creatures we see today. Ancient texts and ruins suggest that they were grateful, intelligent, and deeply spiritual. Their temples were carved from ice and crystal. Their songs echoed through frozen halls. And their culture thrived in harmony with Skyrim's frozen wilds. But history, as always, is written by the victors. When Ysgramor and his followers arrived from across the sea, the Snow Elves greeted them not with war, but with curiosity. For a time there was peace, but peace is a fragile thing in Skyrim. It shattered in blood at Sarthal, when the Elves, fearing the growing power of the human settlers, slaughtered the Nords in their sleep. What followed was Ysgramor's revenge, one of the bloodiest campaigns in Tamrielic history. The Nords drove the Snow Elves from their homes, burning their temples, seizing their lands, and reducing their people to scattered remnants. It was the first fall of the Falmer, and it would not be the last. With their civilization collapsing, the surviving snow elves sought refuge in the only place left to them, the underground cities of the Dwemer, or Deep Elves. But the Dwemer were not saviors. They were scientists, slavers, and cynics. They offered shelter at a cost. In exchange for safety, the snow elves were forced to consume a strange toxic fungus that grew only in the depths. This fungus would allow them to survive underground, but it did have a side effect. It blinded them permanently. Over time, their bodies changed to match their new environment. Their skin grew pale, their ears elongated, and their minds fractured. They became servants, slaves to the Dwemer. They tended the machines, dug the mines, and built the cities of their new masters. Centuries passed, and with each generation, their memory of sunlight faded, their language twisted, and their souls darkened. When the Dwemer mysteriously vanished from the world, the Falmer were left behind, blind, furious, and broken. They inherited the ruins of their oppressors and turned them into kingdoms of horror. The Falmer that inhabit Skyrim today are almost unrecognizable from their ancestors. They live in sprawling networks of tunnels and ruins, breeding in darkness, their society reduced to primal hierarchy. They are ruled by chieftains and Falmer warmongers, served by Charus, and sustained by violence. Their vision is gone, but their other senses are heightened. They hear the faintest footstep. They smell blood through stone and communicate through guttural screeches. The Falmer's blindness is not just physical, it's symbolic. They have lost all sight of their former selves. And yet, even in their degeneration, there are hints of what they once were. The carvings on their walls echo the designs of ancient snow elf temples. Their weapons, though crude, still bear traces of elven craftsmanship. Their shrines, dedicated to gods long forgotten, suggest that a fragment of their old faith still lingers in the dark. They are not merely beasts, they are the ghosts of a civilization that refuses to die. The relationship between the Falmer and the Dwemer is one of the most haunting dynamics in Elder Scrolls lore. It's a story of betrayal disguised as mercy, of proud people made slaves by those who promised salvation. The Dwemer's logic was cruelly pragmatic. Why destroy your enemies when you can enslave them? Why kill the snow elves when you can break them down piece by piece until they forgot they were ever free? In doing so, the Dwemer unwittingly created their own destroyers. When the Dwemer vanished, their disappearance still one of Tamriel's greatest mysteries, the Falmer inherited their tunnels. They became the new rulers of the underground world, but they did not inherit the Dwemer's intellect or purpose. They inherited only the ruins of their pain. Now the Dwemer's once grand halls are filled with screams instead of gears and gold. Their legacy is not progress, it's vengeance. And in a dark, poetic way, the Falmer are the Dwemer's punishment, a living reminder that cruelty breeds monsters. For most adventurers in Skyrim, the first encounter with the Falmer is unforgettable. Perhaps it happens in Blackreach when the faint glow of mushrooms gives way to the sound of skittering claws. Wherever it happens, the reaction is always the same: shock, fear, and fascination. The Falmer are unlike any other enemy in the game. They move unpredictably, fight savagely, and seem to sense your presence long before you see them. Their attacks are sudden, their weapons coated in poison, their armor made from the carapaces of Charus insects. Every battle against them feels desperate, not because of their strength, but because of their sheer inhumanity. They are a mirror of what the player could become, consumed by survival, stripped of compassion, surviving in the darkness. But in the mythic language of Skyrim, blindness means more than the loss of sight. It means a loss of truth as well. The Falmer's blindness is a metaphor for their ignorance of what they once were. They cannot see the stars, the sun, or their own reflection. They cannot see the beauty of the world they lost, nor the horror of what they've become. In that way, the Falmer's condition mirrors the blindness of others in Skyrim. The political blindness of the Empire, the moral blindness of the Thalmor, the ideological blindness of the Stormcloaks. Everyone in Skyrim is, in some way, blind to their own faults. The Falmer simply make that metaphor literal. They remind the player that all civilizations, no matter how grand, can be reduced to savagery if they lost their sight, their vision of what matters. The Falmer are not merely monsters. They are victims, survivors, and symbols. Their story is one of the most haunting in the Elder Scrolls series, because it forces the player to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil is often born from suffering. They remind us that the line between civilization and savagery, between light and dark, is fragile, and that anyone given enough time in the shadows can forget who they once were. In the grand tapestry of Skyrim's lore, the Falmer are the thread that ties tragedy, horror, and history together. They are people who once touched the stars, only to end up crawling in the dirt. A mirror for every empire that thought itself eternal. When you slay a Falmer in the dark, you're not killing a monster, you're killing a memory, a fragment of a civilization that the world chose to forget. And perhaps that's what makes the Falmer so betrayed and so curious. Not their blindness and not their cruelty, but their persistence. Even in the deepest dark, they endure. The Falmer's existence poses an unsettling question. What happens to people who are completely erased from history? No bards sing of the Snow Elves, no Jarl mentions them. Their temples are buried, their names unspoken. The world above has forgotten they ever lived. In that sense, the Falmer are not just physically underground, they are buried by memory. Skyrim is a world obsessed with heroism and legacy. I've said it all before. The Dragonborn is celebrated, the Nords cling to ancient traditions, and even the Dwemer are remembered through their ruins. But the Falmer, they are the nightmare history refuses to confront. Their presence in the game serves as a silent warning that the line between civilization and savagery is thinner than anyone dares to admit. When you walk through their halls, you can almost feel the echo of the laughter, the whisper of old prayers, and beneath it all, a sense of profound sorrow, because even monsters remember what it feels like to be human. In a world as cruel and unpredictable as Skyrim, luck can mean everything. It determines who survives a dragon's attack, who escapes a collapsing cave, who finds gold in a chest instead of a dragon's curse. Yet for one man, luck was both his name and his undoing. His name was Lucky Lorenz, a seemingly ordinary Nord whose story ends not in glorious battle or heroic sacrifice, but beneath the crushing weight of a fallen tree. He was not a warrior, nor a mage, nor a thief. He was just a man, and his death, frozen forever in one small cabin by the river, has become one of Skyrim's strangest and most quietly tragic tales. Lucky Lorenz embodies the dark humour and quiet melancholy that run beneath Skyrim's vast landscape. His story, though only hinted at through environmental clues, reveals more about the nature of fate, irony, and human fragility than some of the game's longest quests. In the shadow of his ruined home, we are reminded that in Skyrim, as in life, luck is not protection, it's temptation. Lucky Lorenz's cabin lies just south of Ivarstead, nestled beside the river that winds its way toward Lake Gear. At first glance, it looks like any other homestead, a simple log structure with a small dock, a few crates, and the faint remnants of a peaceful life. But as you approach it, it becomes clear that something terrible has happened here. The roof has collapsed, the chimney shattered, and most strikingly, a massive fallen tree has smashed through the cabin, crushing its owner beneath. Lorenz's body still lies there, twisted awkwardly and splintered with wood and debris. There is not really a lot of blood, no signs of struggle, no bandit attack, just the quiet, terrible stillness of an accident. Next to his body lies his journal, and within its pages we find the hint of a man who may have been running from something, or perhaps towards something. The irony of his name, Lucky Lorenz, strikes you immediately. It's as though fate itself mocked him, allowing him to believe in fortune right up until it crushed him beneath a tree. Lorenz's journal is short, but rich with subtext. It tells us he was not a farmer or a hunter, but a scavenger, a man who found a ring and a small fortune of coins and supplies. His words carry optimism, perhaps even pride, as though luck had finally favoured him. His life of hardship, wandering, and risk seemed to have paid off. He had a home, a river, and a bit of wealth. His final entry speaks of his intent to settle down, to live quietly and enjoy his newfound luck. And then, as if to prove that Skyrim is no place for dreamers, the tree fell. The player never learns exactly how it happened. Was it a storm, a dragon's passing shadow, a careless strike of his own axe? The ambiguity only deepens the tragedy. Lucky Lorenz's optimism becomes his curse. He named himself after fortune, and fortune punished his arrogance. Few locations in Skyrim tell such a complete story without dialogue or quests. Lucky Lorenz's cabin is a masterclass in environmental storytelling. Every detail, from the angle of the fallen tree to the scattered furniture, tells you something about his final moments. His bed is crushed, his belongings, a handful of books, a few bottles, and his lucky ring remain untouched. His small boat still rests peacefully by the dock, implying that he had been living here comfortably, unaware of the danger looming just above him. The tree's placement feels almost deliberate, as if nature itself conspired against him. It's not a battlefield, it's not a bandit raid, it's an accident. The cruelest, most mundane kind of death in a land obsessed with destiny and glory. The tragedy of Lucky Lorenz stands out precisely because it is so ordinary. While heroes fight dragons and kings wage wars, he simply dies, forgotten, unlucky, and utterly human. Before settling near Iverstead, Lorenz was likely a wanderer. His journal and possessions suggest a man who made his living scavenging, exploring, and surviving off what he found. Perhaps he once delved into caves for treasures, fought off bandits, or sold goods in small villages. The gold and ring he mentions could have come from any number of Skyrim's countless ruins. But more importantly, it suggests a dreamer. Someone who believed that fortune could be earned through persistence, not birthright. And for a moment, it worked. He had carved out a life for himself away from the chaos of cities and wars. His little cabin was a place of peace, a rare comfort in a world of constant struggle. But Skyrim doesn't reward peace, it devours it. The same wilderness that gave Lorenz a home eventually claimed his life. His story becomes a metaphor for the futility of trying to find safety in a land that rejects it. The Elder Scrolls universe is filled with irony, but Lucky Lorenz's fate might be the purest example of it. His name, his optimism, his newfound wealth, all of it leads to a death that feels both absurd and inevitable. It's the kind of dark humour that defines Skyrim's world, a place where the dragons can burn cities to the ground, but one unlucky man is killed by a tree. Players often chuckle when they find him. After all, it's easy to see the humour in a man named Lucky, crushed by fate itself. But beneath that humour lies a deeper commentary on Skyrim's relationship with destiny. So much of the game's world revolves around control. The Dragonborn's control over shouts, over dragons, over fate. Yet Lucky Lorenz reminds us that not everyone in Skyrim gets to be a hero. Most are at the mercy of forces they can't see or understand. His death is funny because it's meaningless, and that meaninglessness is terrifying. The fallen tree that killed Lorenz represents something powerful, the indifference of nature. In Skyrim, nature is both beautiful and cruel. The mountains inspire awe, but they also hide frostbite and death. Rivers provide life, but they also sweep travellers away. Wolves, bears, and saber cats roam freely, indifferent to the wars of men. Lorenz's death wasn't an act of malice or destiny. It was nature doing what it does. Trees fall, storms rage, life ends. This brutal honesty is part of Skyrim's charm. Unlike the grand destinies of heroes, The world's small tragedies remind us that not everything happens for a reason. Lucky Lorenz didn't die to teach a lesson or fulfill a prophecy. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And perhaps that's the most human fate of all. It's strange how often Skyrim's darkest moments are wrapped in humour. The name Lucky Lorenz alone feels like a cruel joke written by the gods, or by Bethesda's developers who seem to delight in blending tragedy with irony. But this dark humour gives the world depth. It mirrors the absurdity of real life, where bad luck strikes the good and undeserving. The juxtaposition between Lorenz's name and fate becomes more than a punchline. It's a meditation on the way Skyrim's world treats its inhabitants. The Dragonborn may defy death and reshape the world, but the common people, the Lorenzes, the Anises, the Nafi of Ivarstead, live and die in obscurity. Lucky Lorenz is a reminder that humour and sorrow often coexist. His story makes players laugh at first, then think later. And that emotional duality is what makes Skyrim's storytelling so enduring. There is a loneliness to Lucky Lorenz's death that sets it apart. No one mourns him, no one speaks his name, his body remains unburied, visited only by curious travellers who happen upon his cabin. The journal and Lucky Ring are the only testaments to his existence. This loneliness reflects a theme that runs through Skyrim's wilderness, the forgotten dead. From the skeletons in mountain caves to the ghosts in the barrows, the land is littered with stories like his. Yet Lorenz's tale stands out because of its normalcy. He wasn't a soldier who fell in battle or a mage consumed by his own magic. He was just a man who wanted a home. His death is the purest expression of how Skyrim forgets its people. Amid dragons and Daedra, there is no space for the unlucky and unimportant. Lucky Lorenz never sought glory. He wasn't part of prophecy, a rebellion, or a guild. Yet his story lingers in players' minds precisely because it resists meaning. He is the most unlucky NPC in all of Skyrim, not because he was evil or foolish, but because he was human. His death captures the strange beauty of Skyrim's world, a place where fate can crush you without warning, and where even the smallest stories can echo louder than the shouts of dragons. In a land obsessed with destiny, Lucky Lorenz reminds us of the cruel randomness of life, and the quiet dignity of those who never got the chance to be heroes. Skyrim is a land filled with noise. Dragons tear through the skies, cities bustle with life, dungeons echo with the sounds of battle and discovery. Everywhere you go, the world seems to demand your attention. But not every place in Skyrim is like that. Some locations don't fight to be seen. They don't offer quests, rewards, or even clear stories. They sit quietly at the edges of the map, easy to miss and even easier to forget. These are the empty places, the abandoned ones, the locations that feel less like part of a game and more like something left behind. Some rest along the frozen northern coast, some lay bare in bustling areas in Markarth. But when you first come into contact with an empty place, you realise something. No movement, no inhabitants, no explanation. Just the remains of something that didn't last. And in a world as loud and eventful as Skyrim, that kind of emptiness stands out more than anything else. Clam Digger's Camp is the kind of place most players will walk past without ever realising it exists. And in a game like Skyrim, that says a lot. It sits quietly along the northern coast, east of Dawnstar, where the Sea of Ghosts stretches endlessly into a pale frozen horizon. There are no dramatic ruins here, no towering Nordic structures carved into the mountains, no glowing markers pulling you in with the promise of something important. Just a small weathered camp pressed against the shoreline, exposed to the wind, the cold, and the constant sound of waves breaking against ice. At first glance, it barely feels like a location at all. A few bedrolls, a cooking spit, scattered tools, and the faint suggestion that someone once tried to live here. But that's all it is, a suggestion. There are no active inhabitants, no quests to guide you, no narrative thread to follow. It exists in a strange liminal space between presence and absence. where everything points to human activity but nothing remains to confirm it. And that emptiness is what makes it so interesting, because Clam Digger's camp isn't just abandoned, it feels forgotten. Not in the dramatic, tragic way that Skyrim often presents its ruins, with skeletons posed mid-story, or journals spelling out exactly what went wrong, but in a quieter, more unsettling way. There's no clear explanation for why it was left behind. No signs of struggle, no obvious danger, no final moment preserved in time. Whoever was here simply isn't anymore. And the game offers no answers as to why. That lack of context creates a very different kind of atmosphere, one that relies entirely on implication rather than exposition. You're left to fill in the gaps yourself, to imagine what life might have been like in a place like this. And more importantly, what could have driven someone to leave it behind? The location itself doesn't help much. The northern coast of Skyrim is one of the most inhospitable regions in the game. It's cold, isolated, and largely devoid of meaningful activity. Unlike the forests of Falkreath or the plains of Whiterun, there's very little sense of life here. The environment feels static, almost indifferent, as if it would remain exactly the same whether anyone lived there or not. And that indifference is key to understanding why this camp feels the way it does. It's not just empty, it's insignificant. Not in a designed sense, but a narrative one. This isn't a place the world cares about. It's not strategically important, not culturally relevant, not even particularly useful beyond the small, mundane act of gathering clams along the shore. Which raises an interesting question. Why was anyone here in the first place? The idea of someone choosing to live in such a harsh, isolated environment suggests a kind of quiet desperation. Maybe they were trying to get away from something. Maybe they had no other options. Or maybe they were simply drawn to the solitude, to the idea of existing at the very edge of the world where no one would bother them. Skyrim never tells you, and that uncertainty becomes part of the experience. It transforms the camp from a simple environmental detail into something more reflective, something that invites interpretation rather than delivering a very clear answer. And in doing so, it highlights one of the more subtle strengths of Skyrim's world design: its ability to create meaning through absence. Most of the game's more memorable locations rely on spectacle. Massive ruins, dramatic lighting, enemies waiting to challenge you. Clam Digger's camp does the opposite. It removes all that. There's no danger here, no reward, no sense of progression. Just a quiet space that exists entirely outside the player's usual motivations. And because of that, it's easy to ignore. There's nothing pulling you in, nothing demanding your attention. You have to choose to stop, to look around, to consider what you're seeing. In a world filled with noise, dragons, quests, battles, constant movement, places like this create contrast. They slow things down. They give the player a moment to step outside the usual loop of action and reward and just exist in the space. And while that experience might not be as immediately engaging, it lingers in a different way, not as a memorable event, but as a feeling, a sense of quiet, of absence, of something that used to be there and isn't anymore. And in a game as large and as busy as Skyrim, that kind of emptiness can be just as meaningful as anything else. Deep Folk Crossing is one of those places in Skyrim that feels important the moment you see it. And yet, the longer you stay there, the more that importance begins to unravel into something quieter, something far more hollow. Located high in the mountains north of Markarth, it stretches across a deep chasm in the form of a massive Dwemer bridge, an imposing structure of stone and metal that immediately suggests purpose, scale, and history. From a distance, it looks like a landmark, the kind of place that should lead somewhere or guard something, or at the very least tell a story worth hearing. But when you finally arrive, when you step onto the bridge itself and take in your surroundings, what you're met with is not discovery, but absence. There are no bustling ruins here, no hidden city beneath it, no sprawling dungeon waiting to be explored. Just the bridge suspended over nothing, connecting one quiet stretch of mountain to another. And that's what makes Deep Folk Crossing so strangely compelling. It feels like a piece of something much larger. But whatever it once connected to is gone, leaving behind only this isolated fragment. The Dwemer, known for their advanced architecture and sprawling underground cities, built structures with clear intent. Their ruins are usually dense, complex, and filled with purpose. But this bridge stands apart from that pattern. It doesn't lead into a ruin. It doesn't act as an entrance or a gateway. It simply exists, elevated and exposed, as if it was once part of a system that has long since disappeared. And that creates a unique kind of emptiness. Not the emptiness of a place that was abandoned in a hurry, but the emptiness of something that has outlived its own function. There's a difference between a location that feels unfinished and one that feels forgotten. And Deep Folk Crossing sits firmly in the latter category. It doesn't feel like it was meant to be more and never became it. It feels like it was once part of something meaningful, something complete, and over time that context eroded until only this single structure remained. The environment around it reinforces that feeling. The mountains are quiet, the air still, the sounds coming from the wind and the distant wildlife that barely interacts with the space. There are no NPCs living there, no signs of recent activity, no evidence that anyone has tried to reclaim or repurpose the structure. It's not dangerous, not particularly rewarding, and not tied to any major quest, which means most players will visit it once, if at all, and then move on without much thought. But if you stop and look at it, really look at it, the bridge starts to feel less like a location and more like a question. Why is it here? What did it connect to? Why build something so large in such an isolated place when you can just go around? Skyrim never answers these questions, and that silence becomes part of the experience. It forces you to confront the idea that not every piece of the world is meant to be understood, that some places exist purely as remnants of a past that can no longer be fully reconstructed. And that idea ties into something larger about the Dwemer themselves. They are one of the most mysterious civilizations in the Elder Scrolls universe, known as much for their sudden disappearance as for their technological achievements. Their ruins are scattered across Skyrim, each one hinting at a culture that was both advanced and deeply enigmatic. But most of those ruins still function, in a way. They still have mechanisms, enemies, systems that give them a sense of presence. Deep Folk Crossing doesn't have any of that. It's static, silent, completely removed from the systems that define other Dwemer locations. And because of that, it feels closer to a monument than a ruin. Not something to explore, but something to observe. A structure that has lost its context, but retained its form. And that creates a different kind of atmosphere, one that leans heavily into isolation. Standing on the bridge, surrounded by open sky and distant mountains, you're not thinking about combat or loot or progression. You're thinking about scale, about time, about the idea that something so massive could be reduced to something so empty. It's a reminder that Skyrim's world isn't just built around the player's journey. It's built on layers of history, many of which are incomplete, fragmented, or entirely missing. Deep Folk Crossing embodies that fragmentation in a way few other locations do. It's not just that it's empty, it's that its emptiness feels intentional, as if the game is deliberately presenting you with a piece of a puzzle that you'll never be able to solve. Kenstag ruins are part of the unique places in Skyrim that feels less like a location and more like a fleeting memory, something you're not even meant to fully experience, only briefly witness before it disappears again. Situated east of Morthal in the fog-covered marshes of Yarmarch, the ruins themselves are already easy to miss. The region is flat, desolate, and choked with mist, the kind of environment where visibility is low and landmarks blur into one another. It's not a place players tend to explore thoroughly, and even when they do, Kenstag ruins don't immediately stand out. At first glance, it's just another set of crumbling Nordic stones, partially collapsed and swallowed by the surrounding swamp. There are no enemies waiting to ambush you, no obvious loot that draws you in, no quest marker pointing you towards its significance. It feels empty in the most literal sense. But what makes Kenstag Ruins truly unique and deeply unsettling is that its emptiness isn't consistent, and it changes. Under the right conditions at night, obscured by the ever-present fog, the ruins reveal something that feels almost like it shouldn't be there at all. A group of ghostly figures locked in an eternal silent standoff, both frozen in place as if time itself has been interrupted. There's no movement, no dialogue, no interaction. Just a moment suspended in stillness. And then, just as suddenly as they appear, they're gone. No explanation, no follow-up, no way to engage with what you just saw. The ruins return to their original state, empty, quiet, and seemingly insignificant. This is what sets these ruins apart from almost every other location in Skyrim. It doesn't just lack content, it withholds it. It gives you a glimpse of something meaningful, and then immediately takes it away, leaving you with more questions than answers. Most locations in the game are built around permanence. Enemies respawn, loot resets, environments remain largely unchanged. Kenstag Ruins breaks that pattern by introducing something temporary, something that exists outside the normal rules of the game world. And because of that, it feels less like a designed encounter and more like an anomaly. Something you weren't supposed to see, or at the very least, something that doesn't want to be understood. The figure themselves only deepen that sense of mystery. The ghost you see that leads you to a tomb where bandits are trying to rob is almost contradicting of the whole place entirely. It shows that even in the most abandoned places, the worries of life can still be seen, which makes this ruin even more haunting to this day. But the game never explains who they are, what their story is, or why this moment is being played here, in this forgotten corner of the map. There are no journals, no environmental clues other than the tomb that is being raided. It's just the image itself, stark and silent. It's a form of storytelling that relies entirely on implication, asking the player to interpret meaning from a single, unchanging scene. And in doing so, it creates a different kind of engagement. You're not uncovering a narrative piece by piece. You're confronting the absence of one, trying to make sense of something that refuses to be explained. The environment plays a crucial role in reinforcing this feeling. Jarlmarch is already one of the most isolated and atmospheric regions in Skyrim. The constant fog, the mutated colours, the lack of major settlements. It all contributes to a sense of detachment from the rest of the world. Kenstag Ruins fits perfectly within that landscape. It doesn't break the silence, it becomes a part of it. And when the spectral figure appears, they don't disrupt the atmosphere so much as intensify it. They feel like a natural extension of the environment, as if the land itself is remembering something briefly before letting it fade again. This makes the ruins feel less like a physical space and more like a point where the boundaries between past and present blur. A place where something unresolved lingers, not actively, but passively, waiting to be seen by those who happen to pass through at the right moment. It's also worth noting how easy it is to miss this entirely. If you visit during the day or simply don't spend enough time in the area, you might never see the apparition at all. And in that case, Kenstag Ruins remains exactly what it appears to be, an empty, unremarkable set of stones in an already empty region. And that duality is part of what makes it so effective. The Hunter's Camp with the sulfur-soaking pools is one of the rare places in Skyrim where emptiness doesn't feel unsettling, but instead it almost feels comforting, like a quiet pocket of the world that exists completely separate from the chaos surrounding it. Located near Darkwater Crossing, a region otherwise defined by mining, hardship, and the looming presence of conflict. The camp sits beside a series of natural hot springs that gently steam against the cold air. The landscape here is striking in a way that doesn't demand attention, but rewards it. Pale mineral deposits ring the water, soft light reflects off the surface, and the constant hiss of sulfur vents creates a kind of ambient stillness that feels more alive than silent. It's the kind of place that feels like it should be more important than it is, or at the very least more populated. But it isn't. Instead, what you find here is a small, almost fragile presence of life. Just 3 hunters going about their routines with no sense of urgency, no larger narrative pulling them elsewhere. And despite their presence, the area still feels empty. Not abandoned, not forgotten, but intentionally sparse, as if the world itself is choosing to leave this place alone. That contrast is what makes the location so interesting. In most cases, emptiness in Skyrim is tied to loss or absence, places where something used to be and no longer is. But here, the emptiness exists alongside life. The hunters are not struggling to survive in a harsh environment, nor are they remnants of something greater that has fallen apart. They are simply there, existing in a space that doesn't require anything of them. There's no tension, no conflict, no underlying threat that needs to be resolved. Because of that, the camp feels remarkably stable, almost timeless in a way that few other locations in the game achieve. It's not waiting for something to happen. It's not building towards an event. It just is. And that sense of stillness creates a different kind of atmosphere, one that stands in stark contrast to the rest of the region. Darkwater Crossing, just a short distance away, is defined by labour and limitation, a mining settlement where people are tied to routine and obligation. Beyond that, Skyrim itself is a province of constant motion, dragons attacking, civil war unfolding, quests pulling the player in every direction. But at the sulphur-soaking pools, all of that feels distant, almost irrelevant. The world slows down here, the usual urgency fades, and in its place there's a kind of quiet appreciation for the environment itself. The sound of the water, the movement of the steam, the way that light interacts with the landscape. These details become more noticeable precisely because there's so little competing for your attention. It's a form of emptiness that enhances the experience rather than diminishing it. And yet, despite how inviting the location feels, it remains largely untouched. The fact that there are only 3 hunters here emphasises just how underutilised the space is. In a more typical design, a place like this would be a hub, a settlement, or at least a point of interest with multiple interactions. But Skyrim leaves it almost entirely alone. The hunters don't offer much in terms of dialogue or engagement. They don't anchor a quest or provide a deeper narrative. They simply occupy the space, giving it just enough life to prevent it from feeling abandoned, but not enough to make it feel busy. And that balance is what makes the emptiness so noticeable. It's not the absence of people, it's the absence of activity, the absence of purpose beyond simply being there, which in a game so often driven by goals and progression, feels almost unusual. You're not here to complete anything, you're not here to gain anything significant, you're just here. And that can feel surprisingly meaningful, because it highlights something that Skyrim rarely emphasises. The idea that not every location needs to serve a function. Some places can exist purely for their atmosphere, their mood, their ability to create a certain feeling. The Hunter's Camp is one of those places. It doesn't try to impress you with scale or complexity. It doesn't hide secrets or challenge you with enemies. Instead, it offers something much simpler, a moment of calm in a world that rarely slows down. And in doing so, it becomes more memorable than many of the game's more populated areas. Because those places, while full of activity, are often defined by that activity. They're tied to the quests, to the characters, to the systems that keep the player moving forward. The pools, by contrast, ask nothing of you. It doesn't push you in any direction, and it doesn't even try to hold your attention. The burnt down house in Morthal, the one at the centre of the Laid to Rest quest, is one of the clearest examples of how Skyrim uses emptiness, not just as atmosphere, but as contrast, placing something deeply unsettling right beside something that, on the surface, continues to function as normal. Morthal itself is already a strange town, quiet and fog-covered, lacking the energy of places like Whiterun or Solitude. But it is still lived in. People move about, conversations happen, routines continue. There is a sense of life, even if it's muted. And then there's the house, or what's left of it, sitting just off to the side, blackened and collapsed in on itself. It doesn't blend into the environment so much as disrupts it. It's a permanent scar on the town's landscape, something that cannot be ignored no matter how much the townsfolk might try to move past it. Unlike many abandoned locations in Skyrim, this one has a clear history, a known event tied to it, a fire that killed a woman and her child. But what makes it so effective isn't the event itself, it's what comes after. The house isn't rebuilt, it isn't cleaned up, it isn't repurposed, it's left exactly as it is. A charred skeleton of wood and ash, sitting in the middle of a community that continues to exist around it. That decision creates a kind of tension that most locations in Skyrim don't have. The town is active, but this space within is not. It's empty in the most literal sense, devoid of life, but also heavy with implication. You're not just looking at a ruin, you're looking at something that people in the world actively know about, something recent enough to still matter, and yet it remains untouched. And that raises questions, not in the same mysterious, abstract way as places like Kenstag Ruins, but in a more grounded, human way. Why hasn't anything been done about this? Why is it still here out in the open instead of being cleared away or rebuilt? The answer implied through dialogue and the quest itself. It's that this situation isn't resolved. The fire wasn't just an accident. There's something wrong beneath the surface of Morthal, something the townspeople are aware of but hesitant to confront. And so the house remains, not just as a reminder of what happened, but as a symbol of that unresolved tension. It's not abandoned because it was forgotten. It's abandoned because no one wants to deal with what it represents. That distinction is important, because it shifts the nature of the emptiness. This isn't a place that time has moved past. It's a place that time is stuck on. The rest of Morthal continues forward. People go about their lives maintaining the appearance of normalcy, but the house anchors everything in place. It refuses to let the town fully move on. And when you approach it, when you step into the remains of the structure, that feeling becomes even more pronounced. There's very little to interact with, no enemies, no loot of significance, no complex layout to explore. Just debris, ash, and the faint outline of what used to be a home. It's quiet in a way that feels intentional, as if the game is asking you to sit with the space rather than do anything about it. And that stillness contrasts sharply with the idea of a home, a place that should be filled with warmth, activity, and life. Instead, you get the opposite: cold, silence, and absence. And yet, just like within the town itself, there's more beneath the surface. The Laid to Rest quest reveals that emptiness isn't entirely empty. The spirit of the child, Helgi, lingers, tied to the location in a way that blurs the line between presence and absence. This adds another layer to the space, turning it from a simple ruin into something more emotionally charged. It's no longer just about what was lost, but about what remains, not physically, but spiritually. Refugees' Rest, located along the harsh eastern edge of Skyrim near the border of Morrowind and the Dunmouth Pass, is one of those locations that feels defined not by what's there, but by what should be there and isn't. At a glance, it appears to be exactly what the name suggests: a small makeshift shelter meant for people in transit. A temporary stop for those fleeing something behind them or searching for something ahead. There are a few basic supplies, a tent, signs of survival, rather than settlement. But despite that implication of movement, of passing through, the place feels completely still. There are no refugees when you arrive, no travellers resting, no voices, no sense that anyone has been there recently. It's not bustling, not even lightly occupied. It's just empty. And that emptiness carries a very different tone compared to the other abandoned places in Skyrim. This isn't a ruin reclaimed by time or a structure left behind after some dramatic event. It's a place built for people who never came. Or perhaps came and left so quietly that they may as well have never been there at all. The surrounding environment reinforces that feeling. This part of Skyrim is cold, jagged, and unwelcome, with the looming presence of Morrowind just beyond the mountains. The Dunmouth Pass itself suggests transition, a crossing point between regions, cultures, and histories. It's the kind of place where you would expect movement, especially in a world shaped by conflict, displacement, and political tension. The Red Mountain eruption, the ongoing instability in Morrowind, the border unrest across Tamriel. All of these factors imply that there should be people on the move, seeking refuge wherever they can find it. And yet, Refugees' Rest stands alone, untouched by that movement. It feels like a preparation for something that never fully materialized, or perhaps a quiet acknowledgement of suffering that the game never directly shows. That absence becomes more striking the longer you consider it. Skyrim is filled with stories of war, exile, and hardship, but many of those stories are told through active quests or populated locations. Here the story is implied entirely through the name and the setting, without any characters to reinforce it. You're left to imagine the kinds of people who might have needed a place like this. Families fleeing their homes, individuals escaping conflict, travellers with nowhere else to go. And then you're confronted with the reality that none of them are here. The shelter exists, but the people it was meant for do not. This creates a subtle but powerful disconnection between expectation and reality. The name Refugees' Rest suggests life, movement, and temporary community. What you find instead is silence, and that silence feels heavier because of what the name implies. It's not just an empty camp. It's an empty promise, a place that represents safety and relief, but offers neither in practice. This is where the location starts to feel less like physical space and more like a commentary on the world around it. Skyrim is a province caught in conflict, filled with political tension and social division. It's not a place particularly welcoming to outsiders, especially those arriving with nothing. The existence of Refugees' Rest suggests that someone at some point recognized the need for a place like this. But its emptiness suggests that recognition wasn't enough. Whether due to the harshness of the environment, the lack of resources, or the broader indifference of the world, the space remains unused, and that unused state becomes part of its identity. Skyrim is often remembered for its scale, its noise, and its constant sense of movement. Dragons circle overhead, cities carry on with their routines, and quests pull you endlessly from one place to another. It's a world that feels alive, or at the very least, always in motion. But what these empty and abandoned places reveal is that Skyrim's world isn't defined solely by what's happening. It's equally shaped by what isn't. Each of these locations present a different kind of emptiness. Clam Digger's Camp shows us what it's like when a place is simply left behind with no clear explanation, only the quiet suggestion of a life that didn't last. Deep Fault Crossing turns absence into something structural, a massive piece of architecture that has outlived its purpose, standing as a fragment of something we've never fully understood. What ties all of these together is not just that they're empty, but how they are empty. Skyrim doesn't treat absence as a single idea. Sometimes it's peaceful, sometimes it's unsettling, sometimes it raises questions, and other times it refuses to answer them entirely. These places don't guide you, don't reward you, and often don't even acknowledge your presence. They simply exist, quietly at the edges of the world. And in doing so, they reveal something important. Not every story in Skyrim is told through action or dialogue. Some are told through silence, through stillness, through the spaces where something should be and isn't. Because in a world so full of noise, it's often the quietest places that leave the strongest impression.